I'm Matthew Fox, and welcome to a special Fun Friday edition of the Now Showing podcast. Today, I'm going to take a look at a few streaming films, including Blonde, the greatest beer run ever, my best friend's Exorcism, and my streaming pick of the week. Be sure to check back tomorrow as Eric and I have another edition of At the Movies, where we will look at the new horror movie Smile, The Munsters, and Hocus Pocus 2, among others. But for now, let's dive in to this week's Now Showing. As I mentioned, my first film up is Blonde, the Netflix film, which has created quite a buzz. They probably hoped it would be an award season player. It's based on the novel from Joyce Carol Oates, or the book from Joyce Carol Oates, and directed by Andrew Dominic. It features Anna de Armas as Marilyn Monroe and taking a look at her life and career. The film runs nearly 3 hours and earned an NC-17 rating for its sexual content. That gave it plenty of buzz before opening. The buzz will probably continue after the film's been released, but not in the way producers and directors had hoped. Dominic tells the story in a stream of consciousness style that can be tough to follow. It's also quite grim, seemingly focusing on Marilyn's trauma. De Armas gives her all to the role, but it's a grim telling of a story done in a very graphic manner. It should come with some kind of a trigger warning. It's about years of mental, physical, and sexual abuse that ends in Marilyn taking her own life. It's hard to say precisely what Dominic and the producers were hoping the film would say. Either way, I thought it was in poor taste. Anna de Armas and Marilyn Monroe both deserve better. This dropped into my bottom 5 films of the year, which is never a good sign. I gave it half a star. It is now playing on Netflix, but I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to skip that one. On to a film that's a little bit more interesting, and that's The Greatest Beer Run Ever. This is also a true story, this one focusing on Chicky Donahue, played by Zac Efron, who wanted to do something to support his friends from the neighborhood in his New York home while they're out fighting Vietnam. So he joins a merchant marine ship headed that way and decides to head out in the war zone to bring each and every one of his neighbors and friends a beer from home. It's a crazy premise, and at first the film is played for comedy. Bill Murray has a small supporting role, mostly in the early part of the film, and Efron does a great job of selling this kind of wild and seemingly unbelievable journey. But what got to me as we dive more into the film, it morphs in some ways. Russell Crowe pops up as a grizzled war correspondent and gives Chicky a new perspective, as does his time on the front line and connecting with his friends from home, seeing what's really happening on the ground and seeing how it is impacting them. He comes back a changed man. There are some deeply emotional sequences, particularly in the final act. The film runs a little long, and at times it feels like two disparate movies, since it starts out as something of a comedy and ends up as something more of a heartfelt drama. I appreciated Efron in the lead role, and the true nature of the story makes the wild journey feel a little bit more grounded. It's not spectacular, but it was an entertaining romp. I gave it 3 stars out of 5. It is now streaming on Apple TV Plus. Final new film of the week is the Amazon Prime film, My Best Friend's Exorcism. If you're familiar with Amazon Prime of late, in the spooky season, they like to trot out some horror films to get fans going and give people something to watch. And this one fits right in there. It's a horror comedy of sorts that takes the drama back to 1988. Gretchen and Abby are best friends, but Gretchen and her family are about to move. One night, the girls and their friends spin up a Ouija board, because nothing bad has ever happened in film as a result of doing that. And they go take a dip in the lake. After that night, Gretchen begins to act suspiciously, and soon Abby realizes her friend is possessed and she's got to do something about it. The plot here includes an exorcism led by a member of a 1980s Christian boy band. So you kind of get what the vibe is they're going for here. Elsie Fisher is fine in the lead role as Abby, and Amaya Miller has some fun moments as a possessed Gretchen. Mostly, though, the film feels kind of by the numbers. It's not really funny enough to feel like a comedy, and it's not nearly scary enough to feel like a horror film. Unfortunately, it's also not endearing enough with the characters to suck you in. It's kind of just okay. In short, you've probably got better options out there, but if you are looking for just a simple kind of Halloween watch, My Best Friend's Exorcism is on Amazon Prime. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I'm going to end this week, as I do every week, looking at a newly released film on video on demand, and this time I'm looking at Fall. We're in the spooky season, as I mentioned, and one of the horror thriller films I've enjoyed most from this year is now available to rent or buy on VOD. Fall finds Becky, played by Grace Fulton, recovering from the death of her husband as a result of an accident on a mountain climbing trip. Her best friend and fellow climber Hunter, played by Virginia Gardner, convinces her to tackle a new challenge, climbing a giant media tower in the middle of nowhere. As you might imagine, things don't go according to plan. That leaves the ladies stranded and fighting to survive. Director Scott Mann does a great job of shooting the film to create an incredibly tense atmosphere. The way it's shot really brings you into the stakes of the story. I don't do well with heights, so this had me unnerved the whole time. I was terrified at times because of how real they made it feel, being trapped all the way up there with no way out. It also features strong performances from Fulton and Gardner. They do great jobs in the lead role. This was a tense and fascinating ride. It is well worth checking out. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars when it was in theaters. And as I mentioned, it is now available to rent or to buy on VOD. So that's a couple of quick streaming hits for this week's Now Showing. I hope you have fun out there. I will catch you tomorrow on At the Movies. Until then, enjoy watching some film.